Well, now that we've made our way through the Catechism, it's now time to start with the Belgic Confession, which we'll be reading through the month of July. And before we get into the actual articles of the confession itself, I wanted to just give a very brief kind of introduction, not only an introduction to the Belgic Confession, but also just a bit of an introduction to why confessions are important and what we can gain from them, what we can how we can use them and rely on them and that kind of thing. So the first thing that is important to note is that we are a confessional church. Now, when we say that, what we mean is, and I've said this before, but it bears repeating, that we agree to agree on what the scriptures teach. Sometimes people talk about, well, we're just going to need to agree to disagree. And sometimes that's the case. But here, when we're talking about being a confessional church, it's the opposite of that. We agree to agree. And we agree that the confessions are a faithful summary of biblical teaching on the main doctrines of the Christian faith. And so the confessions then are an ongoing sort of authoritative summary that we can rely on and utilize. And that's one of the reasons why confessions are particularly helpful in times of challenge, when there are times of testing, such as the days that we're living in right now, where ideas are being proposed that would introduce significant changes to the way that the church has understood and thought about things before. We're not without a guide for helping us to assess things. Now, of course, Scripture is always the ultimate authority, and if the confessions are not faithfully representing the Scriptures, then they just need to be adjusted. But short of that, the confessions are a very helpful summary about the main areas of Christian teaching that we can go back to. So when we're confronted with some new idea, we can go back and say, well, do the confessions address that? And if so, how? And particularly in recent times, they are being more and more important to us. You know, in times when everything's kind of sailing along nicely and we're on calm seas as the church, which isn't terribly often, I guess, but there are some brief periods where that's the case. The confessions sort of seem unnecessary. But when the waters start to get rough and the church begins to be pulled in one direction or another, the confessions are critically important, and we're finding that to be the case now. And so it's very encouraging that within the denomination there has been a resurgence in uh, a reliance on the confessions and what it really means to be a confessional church and what it means to subscribe to the confessions as office bearers in the church, that we fully agree with their teaching of the confessions and that it is faithful to the scriptures. So it's very important for us and helpful for us then as believers to be reading through them, pondering them, thinking about what they are helping us to understand, and thereby strengthening us against false ideas and false notions that come up from time to time. In fact, they're helpful in times of testing because they were developed in times of testing. The 16th century, particularly, was a time of great upheaval, and as the Reformation was going on, and those that the Lord had renewed with a return to the Scriptures were being persecuted quite severely in some cases, and anytime there's a time of upheaval like that, there are also new teachings that are proposed that aren't biblical, and so the church was getting it from both sides, and so they had this need to develop the confessions because they found themselves in such times of testing. And I want to read just a little bit of the introduction that the this volume has for the Belgic Confession. It says, and talks about it being developed by Guido de Bray, who is a preacher in the Reformed churches in the Netherlands, and so it's referring to things that were going on in the Netherlands. It says, during the 16th century, the churches in this country were exposed to the most terrible persecution by the Roman Catholic government. To protest against this cruel oppression, and to prove to the persecutors that the adherents of the Reformed faith were not rebels, as was laid to their charge, but law-abiding citizens who professed the true Christian doctrine according to the Holy Scriptures, de Bray prepared this confession in the year 1561. In the following year, a copy was sent to King Philip II, together with an address in which the petitioners declared that they were ready to obey the government in all lawful things, but that they would, quote, offer their backs to stripes, their tongues to knives, their mouths to gags, and their whole bodies to the fire, unquote, rather than deny the truth expressed in this confession. So that's the other huge benefit that we have as confessional believers, as believers who belong to a confessional church, is that not only do the confessions provide that summary of Christian teaching, they also provide the foundational beliefs that we stand on and dedicate ourselves to standing on. If they are an accurate summary of Christian teaching, an accurate summary of biblical teaching, then they are where we must stand, and we know that we can stand there securely because we'll be standing on solid ground regardless of what might happen. So they're a place of information, they're a place of teaching, they're a place of strength, and so the confessions are a great gift to the church that the Lord has brought about over the course of time. So I hope that you will enjoy and be nourished by the Belgic Confession as we go through it. I find it to be perhaps the most beautiful of the three confessions that we subscribe to, and we'll get to that right away with Belgic Confession, Article 1.